Hey guys, it's Corey from Redefining Strength. Welcome to this episode of the Fitness Hacks Podcast. So today in this episode, we're going to chat about unlearning and why change is so hard. Michelle will share why you aren't what you eat. I'll go over holiday balance because it is Valentine's Day and including the foods you love, as well as talking about alcohol and even how you can track it and the impact it has. And then finally, we're going to end with a great cardio tip so that you can maximize those cardio workouts. Change is very, very hard. Even if you supposedly like change, it's not usually easy. And it's not only the learning of new habits that's hard, it's the unlearning of old habits. So if you think about it this way, the old habits are oak trees that you've let grow into these big, massive trees. And basically you're trying to uproot them. Versus right now, when you're trying to implement new habits, they're like a seed that you barely just covered with dirt. Like they're really easy to get rid of, right? And not like grow into anything. And those oak trees are really hard to get rid of. So when we're making changes, we have to think about changes in this way. We're uprooting the old habits and planting new ones. And in that process of doing both at the same time, it's complicated, it's overwhelming, it's challenging. So we have to remember that with change, we're unlearning and then we're learning new habits. And I wanted to discuss how you can really go about this process and even embracing and overselling the negative to yourself so it can be easier. We have to remember that we get good at what we consistently do, which is why we're good at what we're doing currently. If you think about it this way, you've trained yourself to believe what you're doing right now is natural and normal. Even if it isn't the best for your health, even if it isn't the best for you long term, your body, your mind want to stay where they are currently. So the calories you're eating, the way that you're eating, how you're training, all these things are what feel instinctual, natural, intuitive, because they're what you're trained to believe is what you should be doing. And your body won't want to change from that. It's why losing weight can be such a hard process. Our body feels safe. It feels like it can survive right now where we're at. Sure, maybe we could use to lose a few pounds or 10 pounds or 20 pounds, but our body thinks right now where it's at is normal. And so therefore it's going to fight that process. Our brain is going to do the same thing when we're trying to instill new habits. So we have to remember that we're going to have to unlearn and break those natural patterns as we even start to create new natural patterns. Because if we don't create that behavioral change, we might reach a goal, but it's so often why we lose the weight and then we end up defaulting back into old habits and we regain the weight later. So remember, what is natural is what you've always done. There are habits you probably replicated without even realizing. It's why you can catch yourself in the act of doing something you've done in the past that you're trying to break and be like, oh no, I did it again, right? So you have to make yourself realize those things. And then we have to remember too that our mindset doesn't want to miss out. Like if you think about it, we have FOMO or fear of missing out with certain things. So if you've always been that person that has a drink at a party or that eats certain things when you go out to a restaurant, you're going to feel like you're missing out because it's what you've always done. And so I think it's also about thinking about that new persona you want to become and be like, hey, am I really missing out? How important is this to me really? So I want to dive into some of those questions a little bit more so that in the process of unlearning, you could also learn the new habits. So first, I want you to write out the old habits that you've done that you know won't work with your new lifestyle. What are you doing currently that is against what you know you'll need to do to move forward? Then create reminders to catch yourself in the act of doing these habits. So let's just say you tend to want to stress eat. So the first thing you do generally after a long day at work is come home and go to the kitchen. Maybe instead of doing this, you have a habit of, hey, I'm going to take the dog out for a walk. Or hey, instead of this, I'm going to go to my room, I'm going to do a little foam rolling, and then I'm going to go figure out what I want to eat because it won't make me mindlessly snack or grab something that I don't want to eat. So think about how you can not only recognize the old habits, but then create reminders to catch yourself in the act. Maybe it's even, putting those things on a higher shelf so that when you go to reach for them, you're like, oh wait, they're not here. That's a little reminder, hey, I don't want to be doing this, right? This is an old pattern I'm trying to break. Then even think about creating replacements for these or the clear reminders to stop doing them. So maybe instead, again, going for that walk with your dog is the replacement behavior, or the reminder is putting it on the higher shelf, or even having meal prep you can grab instead so that you're eating something healthy. Like knowing you like to snack, instead of saying, hey, I can't snack, so that all you think about is wanting to snack, you replace your usual, not as healthy stress eating treat with something that's a vegetable in a dip, or even Greek yogurt dip, or something else that will still hit your macros. So we're creating those replacement behaviors and those reminders not to do the thing that you wanted to fall back into doing because you're trying to unlearn that habit. Then create triggers even for the new habit. So that might mean that you've actually prepped the food, that you have it right in the front of your fridge instead of having to cook it the night of. It might mean that you actually have a note for yourself, hey, do this. It might mean that you have your workout clothes already laid out so that you can go into the gym and do it. But you want to create that reminder of the new habit you want to do. Something to prep your mindset to move forward towards that, to break the old pattern, and also remind you of the new pattern. Because we have to create those new behaviors. We have to, as cliche it is, embrace and love the process, right? Because if we don't enjoy the process, we're not going to keep with it. So we're creating this new lifestyle that actually meets us where we're at. We want that feeling after doing these new habits of, gosh, why didn't I start this sooner? That's the feeling we're trying to create. So remember, in this process of unlearning, right, you're writing out the old habits you've done that you know won't work. You're creating reminders to catch yourself in the act of doing them. You're creating those replacements. You're creating new triggers for the new habits you want to do. And then finally, you're giving yourself grace. You're going to slip up. You're going to fall back into old habits. You're going to say, forget it. I don't care. I'm doing whatever I want today, right? It's going to happen. But then even after it's happened, take that time to assess. What's a 1% improvement you can make the next time, right? And guess what? When it happens again, what's 1% improvement you can make off of that? Each time we're just seeking to learn and grow and make the slip up, mistake, whatever, less impactful and less, mentally impactful, and even move forward a little bit faster from it. So it's not that we won't make mistakes, but we're always trying to learn from them so that they can be a little less bad and a little bit better the next time through. So just remember, in this process, you are uprooting that oak tree and you are planting that new seed. And it can feel like sometimes it's so hard to get rid of those old habits, but take the time to embrace the unlearning as you're retraining new patterns of living, new systems, because it really is all about recognizing that what we've trained our body to do feels natural and instinctual, and it's going to be a process of changing what we believe we should be doing. All right, Michelle, so we're going to talk about why you are not what you eat, all about good, bad, clean, and dirty foods. So take it away.
So we are constantly bombarded with terms through social media and marketing that claim foods to either be good or bad, healthy, unclean, or dirty. And we even do this to ourselves when we tend to enjoy a treat or kind of enjoy some type of a dessert. We hashtag it with cheat day, guilty, sinful, all these kind of hashtags that are out there. But it's really displaying this kind of issue that I have where this clean eating narrative really needs to die. It really is a marketing thing that's out there to get people to kind of moralize food. And the big thing is food has no moral values. Food just is.
It's funny because I actually shared on social media a video that was like, we've got to stop assigning moral value to food. And I got a lot of comments that like, well, these foods aren't healthy. And I replied back saying, hey, yes, we want foods that are whole, natural, that are nutrient dense, but that's a little different. Yes, focusing on quality fuel is key, but we shouldn't make ourselves feel bad for having had something that isn't that way, because let's face it, food is more than just fuel to most of us.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a big piece of the picture. As a dietitian, I know the science behind the food. I know what foods are going to be more nutrient dense, but a big aspect of what I do when I'm sitting down with an individual and actually working on that plan with that person is, what is their mindset? What is their goals? What is actually what's their culture? What are those foods that they need to make sure that they're still experiencing? Because that is really just being a part of kind of truly enjoying life, right? Like, you need to also kind of savor the world around you. And we do that. We connect with food. We have traditions with food. So to get rid of those foods, and it's been an issue in the past where we have even demonized certain cultural foods as being not healthy. And that is not a great mindset to have. And mindset is such a key thing in actually having this whole heart health, right? So it's that holistic approach, really. And sometimes we tend to kind of slip up in that area where we really do want to kind of make sure we're hitting the health and nutrition of foods, but also hitting the joy of food, the joy of eating, what it is we really want to make sure we're enjoying and including in our diet.
And I think touching on that mindset part is so key, because when we put this pressure on ourselves, we destroy our relationship with food. We make ourselves feel like we're even broken because we can't hit this arbitrary standard of clean. And I say arbitrary because based on your dietary preference, you might decide that meat is bad, or that soy is bad, or that X, Y, and Z food is bad. There's no like definition of clean. And so it is finding your balance and even realizing in that mindset, when you create stress around things, you don't allow yourself to get consistent to achieve any goals that you have, but you're also creating a stressor which isn't good for your health. And so it is finding that balance.
Yes, and that I think what you said is so key. There is no real definition of what clean is. It is just a marketing term and it's completely in the eyes of the consumers. So we put it on products. That's why a lot of companies now are claiming things are clean. When if you were to actually look at the back, it probably is very similar to another product that you probably have on your bad list. That's another thing I hate is the good food list, the bad food list. We need to get rid of all of that because it really is going to be different for each individual. And that is something that is so overlooked is really what is going to actually be healthy for you is going to be different from someone else's healthy diet.
And I know you brought up the 80-20 balance when we've talked about clean and dirty foods before. Can you go a little bit more into finding that balance? Because again, yes, we know there's more nutrient dense foods and less nutrient dense foods, but ultimately we see results in our healthiest by what we do consistently. So we have to find that balance.
Yeah, and it really is, of course, 80% nutritionally dense, 20% is that fun, enjoyable foods. So why, science may say oatmeal is healthy because it has the fiber, it has B vitamins, etc., and donuts are bad. Sometimes it's still okay to have that donut and enjoy that donut without the guilt surrounding it. But I get that question a lot. Like, how am I going to be able to hit that 80-20? What do I actually do to make sure I'm hitting that 80-20? And I really have about 3 tips to really focus on when it comes to that 80-20%. And the first one I have is actually, I think many people are surprised by it. But when you're looking at your macros or your day to day, I always challenge people to plan in those fun foods first. Yes, I want you hitting your protein. Yes, I want you to make sure that you're getting those fruits and vegetables. But if you're already making sure that you're planning in those fun foods, it takes away that deprivation that often is kind of wrapped into dieting. So you're able to make sure you're still having those foods that you are enjoying without kind of the stress of, oh, is this going to fit? Oh, I can't do that because that's going to throw me off of my macros. So really making sure that we are planning those in. And that can be a small thing at day to day if you're someone that likes to kind of end your night with a sweet treat, or that can be like, hey, I can do good most of the time, but on the weekends I kind of want to make sure I'm enjoying a little bit, have a little bit more freedom so I can go out and kind of have some fun with my friends or have that social aspect of it.
I also think that it's often overlooked when we see people having these crazy macro cheats or whatever else, and they're like, if it fits my macros, and people are like, well, how are they working that in? That's not healthy. But there is a misconception that like when you plan that in, you have to work around it, and that means you're actually getting a lot of nutrient dense foods to make those things work. The more I want something that is like ice cream or whatever else, the more I'm like, okay, well, I can't have other 20% things at other times. So I'm actually getting more fruits and more vegetables to make that thing work. So there really is this balance you're creating when you are planning in those like fun foods.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you first start, it may be a little bit harder for you at the beginning, but the more you do it, it's just like anything else. The more practice you have at it, the easier it gets. So really making sure that you are, like you said, focusing on the nutrition dense foods the other times to be able to hit that macro at the end of the day. The next thing is really making sure that you are focusing on nutrition by addition. This is where the good list and the bad list kind of kind of make me a little bit frustrated because we put so much emphasis on here's a list of foods you have to avoid because these foods are not going to be you're not going to be able to enjoy them and see success. And that's just, a load of crap, really, because we know that we can always fit foods in, right? And when we put that emphasis on these foods that we need to avoid, one, especially for me, I am that person that if you tell me I can't have something, can't do something, my mind is going straight to that list. And all of a sudden, it's the only thing that occupies my mind. So doing that, a lot of people have a very similar reaction to those lists where they all of a sudden notice it. If it's something that's going to be in the room or someone else is enjoying it, you're going to be that person that is caught kind of watching other people eat because you're really feeling, that fear of missing out, wishing that you were them enjoying that food. But if we focus on what we want to eat more of, so focusing on, more protein, more fruits and vegetables, and we don't really have a list that's a no list, that's your list that you can't have anything from, you tend to be so focused on the more that you're automatically already making it so you're fuller. You're less likely to have bigger portions of those foods that we kind of want to make sure we are limiting, because they are less nutrient dense. So that's really where it comes in, where I always say there's no bad foods, but there can be poor portion sizes. So usually those people that do this approach where they're like, this is the bad list, if they ever deviate and eat some of that, all of a sudden it's like they have it, they're like, well, I had some, so I might as well eat it all type of an approach. So it's can be this all or nothing approach with them.
And it creates a sense of guilt too when you have it, which is what sabotages you even more long term versus when you think you're just adding something in and you could have that, it gives you a sense of having the choice. And I think that's a big thing we have to remember is that when we feel in control, like we have the choice in the matter versus these just are off limits, will be bad, guilty, whatever, that's what sabotages us from actually finding our personal balance.
Yeah, and it does also kind of give you that sense of an understanding, really, where you're like, yes, I enjoy these foods are fun, but I feel better when I make sure I'm eating more of these foods. And that is a big thing that I think sometimes people, if you can get your brain to kind of switch to that thought process instead of like, oh, these are bad, these are good, and you switch to I feel better when I make sure I'm eating more of these and less of that, it's not only more sustainable, but you're more likely to stick to it because you have that understanding moving forward. And then the last thing really to really make sure that you're hitting this 80/20 is going to be focus on the variety. We kind of covered this a little bit when it comes to focusing on nutrition by addition, but we also want to make sure that you are providing that variety to your diet. This is just to make sure that you're getting plenty of those micronutrients that we want everyone to have. And again, if you are focusing on making sure that you are eating a variety of fruits and vegetables, it allows you to kind of stay entertained with your diet. I see a lot of clients that may be hitting their macros perfectly, but then I'll be like, so how are you enjoying your food? And they're kind of like, well, it fits my macros, so this is what I'm doing. But that's not going to be sustainable. If you get bored of your diet, you're not going to stick with it. So it's really making sure that we're kind of adding these things that are going to provide texture, different flavors, and really keep you from being bored. And that kind of aligns with really what healthy eating is. It's not going to be this static relationship. It's going to be something that does kind of ebb and flow. And that needs to also mean that your diet itself has that variety. So if you're a meal prepper and you eat the same thing for 1 week, that's fine. Like I know a lot of people that can do that, but I would say then next week we want to make sure we're swapping out those proteins and those fruits and vegetables.
And little changes can really add up to the meals, like a slightly different vegetable or having sweet potatoes over regular potatoes. And not only the types of foods we're eating in variety, but even the ways we meal prep can really help, like create that variety. Like don't not go out to restaurants if you enjoy it. Maybe find some healthier options or work them in on only specific days. But I think even the diversity in how you're meal prepping and how you're eating can be key because we get sick of cooking at points. So maybe you have some stuff frozen or you have those go-tos that you can order from. Like there are like great restaurants, and even though maybe fast food is not as quality as we would want, there are lots of fast food places that do have those quick options so that we can, even when we get fatigued from prepping, have those other opportunities. And even that variety can really help us stay consistent because we don't feel so locked into this is good and this is bad. Cooking at home is good, eating out is bad.
Yeah, cooking at home, it can be just as unhealthy as sometimes eating out, depending on what it is that you're actually doing. So it is making sure that you again are kind of following that 80/20, making sure that you are making it a priority to keep those foods that you really want to have, that you truly enjoy, in. And I even do that when I do eat out. If I do eat out and I'm going to a place and it's like, I really want fries this week. So I'm going to make sure that going to be able to fit those fries in. But if I'm going to somewhere else where I'm like, yeah, I don't really like their fries, but I really like this product that they have, I'm going to make sure I'm going to be eating that and not wasting my time kind of on the other filler items.
I wanted to touch on one other thing too with all of this. It's the mindset we sort of get when we enter into one of these diets because of the praise we get, right? When you start cutting out foods and you can be like, well, I only eat these things. There is a ego that gets in that. Like I know I've had it when I've done different diets. Well, I'm just better, because I'm only eating these things or I do this way, right? And so I think it's such an interesting mindset, and I wanted to discuss how we could avoid falling prey to that ourselves, because that does lead to us then making ourselves feel guilty when we don't maintain that persona we sort of adopted, but also how we can avoid pushing that onto somebody else a little bit.
Yeah, so really with that, there's two things. It is an ego thing. It's this thing like, oh, look at me, I'm trying to better myself. But a lot of that has to do with this. I think society is wanting to make healthy eating like this unachievable high standard. So we want it to be hard because we want to kind of make it so like, oh, well, yeah, that's really difficult. So I can't be there unless I have the income to eat that way, have the time to eat that way, when it's really just putting these specific diets on a pedestal that so that they're unattainable for most people. And we like to praise each other because when people do things differently, and it's not necessarily always us trying to be bad, we want to encourage people to be healthy and to strive for health. So we really, when people are making changes, we want to give them encouragement because people tend to be cheerleaders that are in your life. Like people that are here to support you when you say like, yeah, I'm doing this for health, they're going to be like, awesome job, good job. They're not taking into the consideration like, oh, is this going to be sustainable for you? Are you enjoying your food? It's very much looking on the outward aesthetic of you. And sometimes, even when we hear that people are on a diet, we automatically assume that they look better and or have lost weight. In my experience, when I did the 6 diets where I tested them, I would, I'd be doing these diets for not super long periods of time, and I would have some loss, some gain. I ended up, gaining slightly more at the end of all of it. But I remember when I was doing the most difficult diet that I was throwing up the meals because I couldn't gag them down. I was on the verge of going to the hospital because it was just really hard to stick to and I was dealing with really bad cramps. I would get people saying, "You look so good." And in my mind, I was like, "Oh, if I look good, this must be working, right? Like maybe I should stick to this longer." And so it was feeding that like, oh, maybe I should keep going with this even though I already had signs that this wasn't going to be a sustainable and a healthy way for me to lose weight. The outward, kind of comments made it so I was like, maybe I should stick to this and do this longer. And it's really one, you should never be commenting or complimenting someone on their outward, like if the very first thing you say to someone, and I know we do it because we love people and we want to encourage them, but if the very first thing you say to someone when you see them after a long period of time is, "You look so good, have you lost weight?" We need to kind of make sure that we are keeping that a little bit off the topic of conversation. And instead, it should just be like, "Hey, you look really good." Or even taking that off, let's completely change that, or just say, "I've missed you. It's so good to see you." And completely taking off the comments that have to do with kind of the physicality of how someone appears, because it really can be feeding those journeys, those unhealthy journeys, when people get those comments. And it's one of those things too that as a society, again, we are just kind of programmed to say that to people. And I know, like, and I'm guilty of this, and I'm going to kind of throw my dad under the bus here, because I know if I see my dad and I tell him, hey, you're looking really good, like, have you lost weight? I'm going to make his day, right? But I'm not considering what steps he took or what other people are kind of taking to have lost that weight. We don't know if their weight loss is from depression, from an unhealthy diet, anxiety. There's this whole other thing that's kind of that back door to really opening, that can of worms.
I love that. Just saying, hey, fabulous, how you doing? Like taking it off of that and really promoting them seeking out whatever they want out of their life too. And just realizing that all of this is about meeting ourselves where we're at and seeking to constantly improve through realizing that foods are not good or bad. We always want to fuel our body. This is the vehicle we are stuck in for the rest of our life, and we want to take care of it. But we have to understand that even part of that is not creating too much stress and really enjoying aspects of our life as well.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Michelle. All right, so it's a holiday. Today is Valentine's Day, but it can be any holiday. It can be a vacation. It can be a day off from work, whatever else it is. It is a day where you don't necessarily want to do what you should be doing, right? But you also don't want to sabotage yourself. A lot of times it can feel like, we look at a cookie and we regain the weight, or every vacation we take, we set ourselves back. And so we don't want that feeling. We do have to recognize that as we're trying to make progress towards our goals, it will be easier to have sort of little setbacks or regain a little bit of weight because our body wants to return to what it thinks is normal. So what it thinks is normal is the weight it had been at for the longest amount of time. So if you gain a few pounds with vacation, it's okay, it's gonna happen. And the more you stay consistent and keep moving forward, the more you're gonna create those new set points, which will be lower and lower, and the less deviation you'll actually see as you retrain your body to think this new place is normal. But as you're striking that balance, as you're working towards your goals, I wanted to give you some tips, okay? So first, you want to assess how are you going to handle the day. The best thing you can do for yourself is plan ahead. Knowing you have this day come up, knowing it is a special event, whether it's your birthday, it's just a Friday where you usually go do something specific, whatever else it is, you have this event. How do you want to handle it? Okay, there is no one right way, and you might test out a whole bunch of different ways in finding what balance is right for you, especially with different holidays, with different events, with different vacations, okay? But ask yourself, is this day and doing something important, or am I pushing through this hard stick point because I don't really care? So maybe for you, Valentine's Day is a hallmark holiday and you're like, I don't really care, right? Sure, I've done stuff in the past, but it really will not impact me or make me feel like I'm having to make this massive sacrifice to do it. I'm going to push through, okay? That might be your balance. Or on a Friday night, even though you usually go out for girls' night, there's a lot of other girls' nights out there, and so you're going to push through knowing that you always default back and repeat the same pattern of falling off at the same time. So yes, sometimes you have to make that sacrifice to push through a pattern. However, if you know this is a once a year thing that you really enjoy, you're going on this amazing vacation you've planned for forever, you don't want to restrict. So you need to embrace that being on diet in that time period will ultimately sabotage your long-term consistency because you'll feel like you're always that person on the diet. You don't want to do the habits the other time because you feel like you're missing out on everything, okay? So you want to assess, is this something I can push through, or is this day so important that I really will feel like I'm missing out? Then you have to think, are there specific things I want to work in or macro-friendly versions I can make? So let's just say it is Valentine's Day and you do want the dessert or you want a glass of wine with dinner. Work those things in first. Plan those things in first and map everything else around it. Maybe you usually have a massive pasta dish and with your macros right now, you're like, hey, I could do a nice surf and turf and I'll be just as happy with that because I'm making something special for myself. So think about if there's a macro-friendly version you can make. And you might determine in all this, no, I want to go out to this restaurant. I want this Valentine's Day meal. We always do this, amazing tasting menu and I love it and I don't want to sacrifice on that. So say, hey, that's my balance. How can I work around this for the rest of the day? Can I go higher protein and lower calories so I have this buffer worked in? Can I make this, that cheat day or this day that's unlogged, knowing that I'm be extra consistent around it, maybe even tweaking my macros a little bit more to be a little bit more in, a cut or stricter or whatever else to strike that balance. So mentally, I feel really good about completely letting go. But assess, if there is something that you can't make that macro-friendly version for, that you can't work around, how do you want to handle it? Or, maybe you can't hit it with your current macro ratio, but you're going to set a calorie cap and a protein minimum because you know that accountability of still tracking with some goal will help you not sabotage yourself, will help you stay consistent in making those behavioral changes. But the key is really assessing what you need, because not every day is going to be the ideal, but learning to hit those minimums and be a little bit better than we would have been in that situation in a previous year, a previous week, a previous month is really where we're going to see those improvements come. So whether or not it's this holiday or any other holiday or a vacation, go in with a plan so that you know how you're going to handle it, because most importantly, you don't want to feel guilty about what you've decided to do. Even if you said, hey, this is my lifestyle balance and I'm not going to care this whole time. I, spend 300 some odd other days of the year really staying focused and dialed in so I don't have to care now. That's great. But you do not want to feel guilty, because you want to know that this is part of your balance and that this is helping you ultimately move forward consistently. All right, so we're gonna talk about alcohol, which I know can be a touchy subject. And I am talking about the moderate consumption of alcohol. If you do have any issues with alcohol, you want to obviously take care of yourself and get anything you need addressed, okay? But I'm talking about, a lifestyle balance with alcohol and whether or not you can include it and see the results that you want. So I will not excuse alcohol. I am a fan of alcohol. I love making craft cocktails. Whether or not they're really craft, I guess, is up for debate, but I like trying to make fancy cocktail drinks. I like going out and getting them. It is part of the experience for me. It is something I really enjoy. I nerd out about it. I love all the different infusions. Anyway, enough about cocktails, but for me, it's part of my lifestyle balance. However, I like myself and everybody else to go in with their eyes wide open when they're making decisions. Alcohol is a toxin. It is not going to benefit you in any way, shape, or form if you want to move as fast as possible towards your weight loss or body recomposition goals or even gaining muscle goals, okay? You gotta know that. And you can try and be like, well, my wine, it has antioxidants. Okay, no. They've shown that any amount of alcohol is basically not good for you, okay? But you gotta weigh the pros and cons, because there are things about alcohol and our enjoyment of it, our enjoyment of the lifestyle balance, that in my opinion do pay off. So just to be clear, alcohol impairs our recovery, it suppresses fat oxidation, slowing our fat loss results, it increases inflammation, it reduces the quality of our sleep, it negatively impacts the absorption of nutrients, it leads to negative workouts the day after, if not more than one. Let's face it, you never generally feel that good after drinking, even if it wasn't a lot of alcohol. So alcohol, in terms of seeking faster weight loss results, is not going to help you. So if you want results yesterday, I would highly recommend that you do consider a period of time without alcohol. That being said, we have to know ourselves and know that the more we restrict something and cut it out, we do have to know we have the choice, right? So if you're saying, hey, consciously I'm cutting this out for a little bit of time, that can be okay. But also if you know that you're a person that any restriction is going to backfire and you're going to want it even more, that might not work. So that's where you want to consider, okay, I know it's going to slow my results, but how can I work it in and find a balance that leads to fast enough results that I stay motivated while keeping that lifestyle balance? So with clients that do think, hey, I do want to sort of see what I can do to work this in, I recommend that they reduce the number of days, even setting it for specific events. So maybe you keep it to once a week, even if you usually have it multiple times a week to start, okay? Drink prior to a day off where you can be active the next day, but you don't necessarily have a training session that's going to be impacted. If you do train earlier that day, because training earlier and then eating, after we started drinking can negatively impact our recovery from the workout, consider doing your workout earlier in the day where you can actually have protein right after to really help you repair and rebuild and make sure that you're actually absorbing the nutrients that you need. That will help at least negate a little bit of the impact of alcohol on your recovery. And then try and even drink on a day where you know you can get extra sleep or be a little bit more relaxed on other days to sort of make up for the impaired sleep of it. Be conscious of drinking water, and then even go in with a plan so you don't let cravings derail you. Because part of the impact that alcohol can even have on our weight loss results, besides the fact that it suppresses fat oxidation, which can cause us not to lose weight as quickly or lose fat as quickly, is that it causes us to want other bad foods. Let's face it, we usually are putting ourselves in a calorie surplus because of consuming the alcohol, and then we usually don't eat the most macro-friendly of foods. We get other cravings, okay? So whether you plan in your alcohol to your actual macros and then base other meals around it, or you go in with a calorie cap, protein minimum, whatever else it is to help you stay consistent, or you even just map out what you're going to eat beforehand, or you say, hey, this is my day where I'm just not going to care, I'm not going to feel guilty, I'm going to get back on track, I'm going to have my consistency otherwise, I know how this is going to impact my weekly averages, but I'm just going to have fun and not care. That's okay, but go in with a plan, okay? if you are choosing to track alcohol into your macros. Just because you still hit your ratio does not mean that alcohol will have no impact. It is still going to create inflammation. It is still going to impair your recovery, which can impact your muscle gains as well as your fat loss. It is still going to impair your sleep, okay? Because of all these things, it is going to impact the results and the speed at which you see results, even if you're hitting your macros while working it in. We have to understand that alcohol is its own macro with 7 calories per gram, okay? So if you actually track it in your logger, it's not going to subtract macros from your actual macrograms, even though it will count as calories. We do want to account for those calories in our macros if you are trying to hit your macros so you don't end up overeating. So in order to do that, you want to take the calories in the alcohol and then divide them in the calories per gram of either fat or carbs. I generally like to have clients do fat because it suppresses fat oxidation. However, if you're on a lower fat ratio and you want to find that balance to still hit your macros, you could do carbs. So you would take the calories in the alcohol divided by 9 for the calories per gram of fat, or divided by 4 for the calories per gram of carbs. But this will help you enter that in and actually subtract the macros from your macro goals. That being said, you also have to account for any mixtures if you do have mixtures as well, and if you do include wine or whatever, there will be some carbs already counted. But you do want to note that you want to track because that will then make sure that you're actually hitting your macros and ratios. Again, though, even with tracking it, you have to account for the fact that it is going to slow results in other ways. So while this might be a way to strike a balance, to be accountable for what you're eating, to even help you see how your weekly averages are being impacted, to see the best results as fast as possible, we have to own that alcohol can be part of a lifestyle balance, but it is not going to lead to the fastest results so that we can determine what sacrifices are worth it. If you are enjoying a Valentine's Day cocktail or glass of wine, maybe you work it in, or maybe you decide it's not part of your balance right now because you are seeking those faster results. But I think it's key we know our options so that we can always be evolving our lifestyle to match where we're at currently. I wanted to help you get more out of your cardio workouts because I think it's really key that we maximize the time we're spending in the gym. It's quality, not quantity. So if you are listening to this, make sure to check out the video just so you can see the demos of some of the movements and help sort of show a demonstration of what I'm talking about. But some key things when we're thinking about getting the most out of our cardio. More is not better. Harder variation doesn't mean we're going to get bigger benefit if we're not able to utilize the correct muscles. And I want to bring this up and use the burpee as a key example. So when you think about doing the burpee, we see all sorts of sloppy things start to happen, right? People are jumping back, their hips are here, they're jumping back up, they're kind of doing this little half jump at the top, right? It's going through the motions of doing it, trying to do a harder move than we've necessarily earned. And when we do that, guys, we're not actually getting as much out of it. If we're not working the correct muscles during a movement, if we're not actually able to go at 100% intensity with it, we're not going to get the benefit of doing a harder variation. We'll get more out of modifying. Modifying doesn't mean making it easier. It means meeting yourself where you're at. If you can't do the push-up and the burpee, so if you're not able to actually control that push-up, come down and then jump up, right? You're not going to get as much out of it. So maybe going down to your knees, doing it off the bench, eliminating the push-up. But doing what you can so you can really maximize every movement and get the most quality out of it will get you more out of that workout. Not to mention, feeling destroyed from your workout doesn't mean it was good enough or hard enough. It doesn't mean you got better results from your cardio workout. So often we'll have workout routines, and I've even had clients say to me, like, oh, you gave me 30 seconds of rest. Well, I didn't need it, so I only took 15. I'm like, no, you needed it. And if you didn't feel like you needed it, then you need to work harder during the 30-second intervals. When there are intervals laid out, 30 on, 30 off, 30, 15, whatever it is, we want to follow those. There's a specific energy system being worked and a purpose to it. Not to mention, even though we might feel like we're going just as hard the next round, we will hit a point of diminishing returns if we're not able to recover sufficiently. So your 100% gets less and less and less. And not only can we be training slowness, so if you're actually trying to train speed, improve your mileage time, doing things like that where you eliminate rest can be harmful because you're going to train slowness, but also you're not working at that 100% intensity. Sometimes resting so you feel super ready to go the next round will allow you to be more powerful, allow you to maintain that harder variation. So don't think that cutting out rest just so you feel more out of breath and more maxed out is a good thing. It's changing what's being worked. So if you are feeling like you haven't earned that rest and that you're not recovering during it, think about how you can maximize the movements. Maybe even modifying that burpee so you can move faster and really get more out of it and work the muscles correctly over just rushing through and getting sloppy. So we want to remember that when we are trying to dial in our cardio workouts, it's not about eliminating rest, it's not about doing the harder variation, it's about quality of whatever we're doing. So if that means that in order to keep moving, instead of just doing like little jump squats that are like kind of like this, right? If you need to get deep in that squat and take out the jump even, take it out, right? Make it something lower impact, doing lunges instead of the split squat jumps. But consider modifying the move so that you can move efficiently, so that you can really maximize the work that you're doing, so that you earn every second of rest that's programmed, okay? We have to stop seeking just to try and make ourselves move more during our workouts or feel more out of breath. We want to be intentional with our training and get quality practice, because practice makes better only as much as the practice is actually good in and of itself. So make sure to modify moves as you need to actually make them harder, and do not eliminate the rest to earn every second that is programmed for you. Hopefully these were some helpful tips so that you can find your lifestyle balance and include the foods you love while seeing results. If you are enjoying a nice craft cocktail or maybe a glass of wine or a beer, I'd love to hear what your favorites are and how you work them into your lifestyle balance.